You're watching the 10,000 League, and today's video is on Ukraine and far-right nationalism. Let's go. Now, if you've been keeping up with the information on the Ukrainian war, just like I have, you might have realised pro-Russian sources, people often referring to the Ukrainian government and its supporters as fascists or Nazis or other such labels. Now, for all of those who don't know the details about the war, started in 2014. There was a Russian-backed government of Ukraine, a man called Yanukovych. Now, Yanukovych was overthrown in a coup, and in his place, a man called Poroshenko became leader of Ukraine. After the coup, the people who started to come into power, we'll have a look at them now. There was Andriy Parubi. Now, he was the leader of Ukraine's armed forces after the coup in 2014. He also happens to be one of the founders of Ukraine's neo-Nazi party, the National Social Party of Ukraine, a party which is now dissolved. Working alongside him is Dmitry Yarosh, who is the leader, or now former leader, of a paramilitary called Pravy Sector, or Right Sector, far-right nationalist paramilitary. And alongside these two men was Alexander Sinch. He was the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine after the coup, but he's also a member of a party called Svoboda, which is a far-right nationalist party that described Russia as, quote, a Muscovite Jewish mafia. It's worth mentioning that the party that Alexander belongs to, Svoboda, is made up and founded by members of the now dissolved neo-Nazi party, the National Social Party of Ukraine, the party that Andriy Parubi was a member of. Now, like most countries, the politicians at the top usually don't represent the people at the bottom. So let's look at the Ukrainian armed forces. Now, I've already mentioned how the leader of Ukraine's armed forces straight after the coup was a man who was also the founder of Ukraine's neo-Nazi party, the Social National Party. But what about the soldiers themselves? The Ukrainian military has, after the coup, devoted an entire wing of its military, its soldiers, its armed forces, to open neo-Nazi soldiers, and they've called this Azov Battalion. Their logo, seen here, is made up of two SS symbols, and one of them being the wolf's angle. Now, the wolf's angle was used by two Nazi SS divisions during World War II. That's where they got it from. The symbol itself did have an older meaning. I know somebody in the comment section is going to point out, oh, it was a rune at one time. But if you are a far-right nationalist with a gun in Europe and you are using symbols used by the SS, there's no room for miscommunication there. Some information on Azov Battalion. They have several thousand members. They currently occupy the entire city of Mariupol in southeast Ukraine. They have their own city. Think about that. They act as if they are above the law. There was a French documentary called Masks of the Revolution in which some filmmakers went to live with Azov Battalion. They found their members having name tags such as Mussolini. They found that they were breaking into courtrooms with their guns open and loaded, trying to intimidate people. Going away for the documentary for a second, they have their own youth wing. And associates of theirs, they have a youth wing in which they dress up children in Nazi SS symbols and put them through a training camp. They also teach those children how to use Kalashnikov rifles, how to disassemble them and reassemble them back together. Now, something I've noticed about Azov Battalion is they don't like to be called Nazis. You know, they are far-right European nationalists. They hate communists, they hate Jews, they hate Russians. But, you know, strangely, they don't like to be called Nazis. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the Western backing for the Ukrainian coup was so strong that they're trying to remold their image. You know, they are fascists, open fascists, and they hate Russians, Jews, trade unionists, communists, and, you know, they're armed with guns, but they're not Nazis. And when I say the Western backing for the Ukrainian coup, well, Poroshenko himself, he's a huge friend of the United States, and the United States has given him everything from military training to funding to diplomatic support. Great Britain has sent trainers to train Ukrainian armed forces, military trainers of course. Now, why Britain and the United States are aiding a military which uses open neo-Nazi soldiers just goes to show how desperate they are to attack Russian influence. That, you know, these Russian-backed militias in the east of Ukraine who are resisting this coup, they are so strong and well organised that the only way that the West seems to think that it can defeat them is by funding open neo-Nazis. But moving on to the rest of this video. But Azov Battalion is only one of a whole plethora of different far-right nationalist militaries who are fighting in Ukrainian civil war on the side of Ukraine against the Russian rebels in the east. Another one of them, and by far one of the largest of these paramilitary groups, is Right Sector. Their flag is loosely based on another far-right paramilitary called the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which was a group funded by Nazi Germany to fight against the Soviet Union. Now, the leader of the OUNB, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Bandera, their leader was a man called Stepan Bandera, a Ukrainian nationalist who fought against the Soviet Union and tried to raise rebel attacks against the Soviet Union and the communists. When World War II came, the Ukrainian nationalists as a whole, for the most part, they worked with Nazi Germany, but many sections of them fought against Nazi Germany at the end when the Soviet Union started to crawl in. I mean, there was a lot of cooperation between Ukrainian nationalists and the Nazi occupying forces in conducting the Holocaust and killing Polish and Jewish people, as to be expected of far-right anti-communists. Now, ironically, Stepan Bandera himself was put in a German concentration camp. However, the Germans released him when the Soviets started to take Ukraine and come closer to Germany. They released him and funded him and then sent him off into the mountains to try to slow down the Soviet advance during World War II. It failed, and eventually the Soviets caught up with him after World War II and had him killed. Now, Stepan Bandera is hailed as a hero among Ukrainian nationalists, as we've already mentioned. His portrait is currently hanging above Kiev City Hall. For those who don't know, Kiev is Ukraine's central city. It's its capital city. It's the basis of where Poroshenko and the coup took place. After the coup, inside Kiev City Hall, the place was decorated with just every dirty symbol you could think of. There were swastikas hanging from the wall, there were portraits of Stepan Bandera, portraits of OUNB flags, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalist Bandera, Nazi sympathizers. According to the BBC, which are huge supporters of the coup, there were Confederate flags flying in the hall itself. Funnily enough though, despite all of this, despite open neo-Nazis gaining the high-up support in Ukraine's politics, despite the largest paramilitary forces being far-right nationalist paramilitaries who organize themselves on the image of Nazi collaborators, despite an entire branch of the Ukrainian armed forces being dedicated to open neo-Nazi soldiers, despite all of this, the BBC had the audacity to claim that Jews and Russians were safe in Ukraine. I don't believe that for a fucking second of my life. That a country that dedicates an entire wing of its armed forces to armed neo-Nazis is somehow a country that is safe for Jews. I don't believe that in an instant, no. I do not believe that a country whose largest fighting paramilitary force is organised in the image of Nazi collaborators is somehow a country in which Russians are safe. The saddest part about all this is we've seen this before. Now, the term that we use in the modern day is a colour revolution. A revolution that is so heavily funded by the United States and its allies that they almost become a puppet, or they are highly influenced by the United States. We've seen this all across Eastern Europe. Yugoslavia is one of the main points. We've seen this recently in Syria and in Libya. You know how well those went down. The United States tried to train rebels in Syria. Many of them ended up joining ISIS. The United States in the 70s tried to fund the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight against Russia, the Soviet Union, the communists, and they ended up becoming the Taliban. We've seen, and now, today we're seeing the United States fund far-right nationalists in Ukraine, and they end up joining these neo-Nazi branches of the Ukrainian military. But there are people who are heroic enough to stand up against the rise of fascism in Europe. I'd like you to meet Russell Bentley. He's a man that I came into contact with for his YouTube videos, and I added him on Facebook too. He's an American. He was a member of the United States military, but he was very unhappy with what the United States government has been doing to other countries. He left the US military, he travelled to Ukraine, he picked up a gun, he fought alongside the Russian militias in Ukraine, fighting against these neo-Nazis who are currently trying to take over Ukraine. He's a very brave man. He puts out a lot of high-quality videos. He works alongside an organisation called, if I remember it correctly, it's on the top of my head, Essence of Time movement, a communist movement. He is a communist himself. He's a United States military veteran. He's an American, and he goes by the name of Texas. That's all for the 10,000 League. I'm glad you enjoyed the video. I hope you did. Like and subscribe for more. Goodbye.